Well, Sandy, thank you so much for your presentation. It's really moving. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And I want to thank you for letting me do this webinar, inviting me to this webinar, and also to the university and everything. So I hope that you enjoy the session. We will have 15 minutes at the end so we can have questions, discussions, etc. And I would be very pleased to listen to all your comments or questions, okay? So I will start showing you this image, and when you see the image, you might be thinking, well, this is a Native American who is on a horse with a headdress of feathers, with a spear. And now I will show you another image. And then here you also have Native American people who are living in Wisconsin right now. And I imagine that from the two pictures, the one that comes more to your head is the first one. And this is because we have the stereotypes, which are a widely held but fixed and oversimplified imagery idea of a particular type of person or thing, okay? And I also want to highlight, Dennis Land highlights that Australian Aboriginal peoples and Indigenous peoples of Americas are frequently portrayed wearing historic clothing with the stereotypical physical features and no eye contact to the reader. A detailed picture of contemporary Indigenous life world is seldom offered. So I will show you now some other stereotypes that we have unfortunately got used to seeing, which are Western movies, because Hollywood wanted to portray a good image of whites, European colonizers versus Native Americans. I don't like to call them Indians because Indian is a real mistake that came back from Christopher Columbus, who thought he was going to India and he went to America. So he called the natives that he encountered in that trip, he called them wrongly Indians, but they should be called, if we refer to the tribes of North America, Native Americans, and if we are referring to those living in Canada, they like to be called First Nations. So I will speak about them all the time as Native Americans because they were born in the land. So these movies have given us the wrong idea of the good and the bad. Native Americans were the bad ones, were violent. The same as you can see here, Peter Pan, a very famous cartoon that was also displayed by Walt Disney. Here they're on a ceremony of the sacred pipe. And this is what was quoted by the Times back in 1900s. The Never Never Land is peopled by red Indians and pirates who lose no time in showing us that they know how to behave as sick. The red Indians always lay their ear to the ground, then give vent to unearthly yells and prepare for scalping somebody, a pirate for choice. So this description that is referring to them as scalpers, violent people, also in a way not very cultured, it was not controversial at the time. I mean, they were not only calling them Indians, but also red, which was the word given for the way whites saw their skin color. So 120 years after, this would be controversial, but at the moment, it was assumed as something normal. We also find, on the other hand, Native Americans were portrayed also as nostalgic, as romanticized with the image of Pocahontas. I'm sure that you're familiarized with this figure, which was very far from what Walt Disney tried to show us. That was a beautiful woman in love with a captain. The reality was very different from that. She was much younger. She was forced to get married. So in a way, we have always seen Native Americans from the white perspective and from the way they wanted us to see them. So we have to discover now, and that's why literature is so nice, that we can see the way they really are. So I would like to mention now that oral tradition has been part of Native Americans 2,000 years from now, and it was very important for them. And I will quote Geneva Gay, who in 2010 points to the importance of stories as a powerful means for people to establish bridges across other factors and separate them, such as race, culture, gender, and social class, and penetrate barriers to understanding and create feelings of kindredness. And also Cepeda in 1995 highlights that the strong oral tradition of Aboriginal peoples, it was also the opportunity to ground literacy and develop in oral stories and reflect the children's family, community, and relationship and culture. So here you can see how this oral tradition has been taking place in different times, in the medieval times, people of different ages, of different races, of different cultural backgrounds. And this is what keeps us together, because it's a moment that you spend with people you want to spend. It's a moment where you share knowledge, experiences, etc. So it's a very powerful source of transmitted knowledge as well. And now I come to ask the following question. This is very important to understand, because what is Native American literature? Okay, so before the arrival of Christopher Columbus, there were hundreds of narrations, stories, and ceremonies that were divided into creation stories, trickster stories, and stories about heroes and animals, and they were transmitted orally. So this has been really debated. What genders do we really find in Native American literature? Again, at the beginning, the first contact with the Native Americans, Europeans thought that this literature was childish because the topics were naive, the vocabulary that was used was very simple, and Arnold Krupat, who was an expert on the European canon, quoted it as the verbal productions of native orality were simply satanic, because they did not accept these oral performances as literature. Since it was something not written, it was not considered to be a gender. So I will take the most, I think, accurate and also recent classification of the main genres of Native American literature by Brotherson back in 2004, where he divides their literature into cosmogony stories, which are stories that speak about the origin of the world, and also supernatural phenomena, explanation for supernatural phenomena, and experiences stories that speak about migration, lineages, trips, etc. So, as you can see here, these are examples of cosmogony stories where they needed to have an explanation about the origin of the world. And it's very much in line with Greek mythology, with the Bible. We need to know where we come from. So here on the left, you can see Gluskap, who was a very famous god creator. So he was very popular among the nations of Mi'kmaq and the Ojibwe, which were located in Canada. And he needed a companion. So he asked for mud, and then he created something that looked like a woman, because he needed a companion, and so the generations would be going and going. So these deities, the way we see them from a Western perspective, they make mistakes. They're not always divine. They're allowed to make mistakes and try again. They're more humanized. And we have on the right side, this is one of my favorites, that is a Sky Woman, who belongs to the Iroquois tradition. Is a tribe also located in Quebec, in Canada, and she was very curious. So she saw the hole of a tree, and she leaned so much to see what was there that she fell through the hole, and she ended up underwater. So she was rescued by animals and put on the turtle's back. You can see there in the picture that she's lying on the turtle's back. And what she did is to put some mud on the turtle's back, and that's the way the earth was created. This is the explanation for why the earth has this shape, this crust, okay? And it was a goddess. She was a goddess. Again, she made mistakes. And again, the animals are helpers of the divinities, which is very interesting as well. Sometimes animals have a more human-like action. They act more like humans. Others, they're acting more like in their role. In cosmogony stories, we find a combination, okay? But I would like to highlight after trickster stories that are very particularly popular among Native Americans because they have a highly didactic purpose. And we have them in the figure of the coyote, because the coyote, if you have ever seen the Looney Tunes, the coyote is like, you laugh at him, right? Why did Native Americans laugh at this character? Because he had his tail between its legs, compared to the fox or to the wolf that had a longer tail and it was bigger. So that was like a power and it was beauty as well. The coyote represents our inner child. Is what we really feel like doing when we're children in an impulsive way, or when they tell us, don't do this, so we do the opposite. He's always breaking the rules, and he has many different roles. Even in the same story, he can be the trickster, he can also be eschatological, he can be sexual. So this character is very popular all over North America. And then we have the figure of the raven, that is also very relevant because he was always associated to death. He was the messenger of the gods. And because he was a bird, he was always a sacred animal because he's closer to divinity, yes? So this character of the raven is also very smart. For example, what he does sometimes is he takes the food that he finds everywhere, puts it in the nest, which is also the representation of a smart animal. He never needs food. He never starves. So it's quite interesting as well. This is more typical of the West tribes of Canada in British Columbia, this animal in the stories, okay? So we continue with experience of stories. You can see here the picture of a family. So this is stories try to explain based on real facts what happened, how did we get to have this parents, the grandparents, etc. And the picture that you can see on the right is a real picture of what you find on a teepee, on the cover of a teepee. Is a buffalo skin that has been dried and treated and dyed as well. And so you can see around it circular shapes, which are telling the story in a circular way of the famous Battle of Little Bighorn, which was a battle that took place where natives didn't expect to be attacked, and they were attacked by surprise, and hundreds of Indian natives were massacred. So some stories that this is very interesting have also been found not only in these deer skins or buffalo skins, but also in crusts of trees. So this is also a way of saying, okay, we have the oral tradition, but there's some evidence that we want to preserve the tradition, putting it in these places. Okay, so I will show you now, we're moving from the oral tradition into the written tradition, and that happens through many genres like drama, novel, poetry. We have very famous artists, but I don't want to get into that. That would be another webinar. But we have found very popular Native American picture books that address to cosmogony, which is very interesting, back in the 1990s, because it was a way of preserving the old traditions, trying to introduce as well more Western elements. So you can see here 13 Moons on Turtle's Back, which is a Native American story about the moon calendar. Why the calendar has animals, why does it have to do with the harvest? Is given an explanation about that, because we have to remember that Native American were always connecting with nature and the universe, so they really knew when to grow strawberries, when the full moon was going to be, because they were great observers of nature. And then we have a very famous Navajo legend that tries to explain why the stars are there and how they fall into the sky, which is beautiful, and it's also the way to explain something of the universe, and that was very typical of oral tradition. These cosmogony stories were normally told at night around a fire because they were sacred, so they had to be respected, and they could take hours and hours, and they were so sacred that sometimes children and people that were listening to the story, they couldn't even eat or go to the bathroom because it was a very special moment, a magical moment. So we moved from this cosmogony picture books back in the 90s to experience picture books that are right now, from 2010 until now. And we find a lot of stories that combine the old traditions with more modern illustrations, but speaking about things that really happened. For example, we're water protectors. Is this woman that is trying to protect water from being polluted due to something that really happened in Dakota, where they created a pipeline and it was going to pollute the water. So people were worried, and this is a way to save the planet as well. So then we have Bow Wow Pow, which is also highlighting the importance of preserving the ceremony. The powwow was like the most important celebration among Native Americans, where all the tribe got together, they bought a lot of food, they danced, and so is trying to making it more modern in terms of Western culture, but preserving that old tradition. And A Day with Yaya is also a grandmother who knows a lot about the health power of plants and flowers, and she's teaching her granddaughter how to know how to choose the right plants depending on what you have. And so this is also passing down the legacy, the knowledge. Okay, so we move from this more oral tradition on cosmogony into experience stories that are more based on real events taking place. And now I will introduce you to the book Fry Bread, which is not a story about post-colonial food. It's a story about a Native American family. So we move from the front cover to the end papers to the back cover. We find a story about cultural diversity, starvation, deportation, and the sense of community and perseverance. So it was written by Kevin Noble-Maillard and illustrated by Juana Martinez-Neal. And it was published by Roaring Brook Press in 2019. And I have to highlight that Kevin Noble-Maillard is a Native American from the Seminole Nation. So he knows very well what he's talking about. He really lives the story, okay? In this front cover, you can see how the Native American is holding her baby, and and she's holding the bowl with the fried bread, and the baby sits in the fried bread. So it is inviting us to know more about this. Yeah, you can see that this book has been awarded with more than 16 awards. And I would like to highlight the medal that you see here, the golden medal, is the Robert F. Siebert Award as an informational picture book. It has also been awarded a Charlotte Hack recommended book by the American Literature Association in 2020. And it's also Kirkus Review's Best Picture Book in 2019. So it's very interesting for all these reasons, okay? Well, now I will show you this, and you can't see anything because it's very tiny, but These are all the nations that they compiled that are now sovereign nations. This means that they have been considered by the US government as free nations where the Native Americans can take their own decisions. So in both end papers of the picture book, you can see the 556 sovereign nations, which is a great research work. They can also be called reservations, tribes, they're given different names, but it's very interesting that they include this information in the picture book. Then in the title page, you can see how a mother is bringing some food on a tray, and she's bringing it somewhere. So we are invited to go with her and see what's going on. We feel like, where is she going? I want to go with her and taste that yummy fry bread. You can also see the details of this book are very interesting, the peritextual elements, because, for example, you can see the dedicatories here are on kitchen utensils. Yeah, so I find this very interesting, all these details taken into consideration. And you can see how the headings of the book are all in red letters and capitalized, and they summarize what fry bread is. All these headings appear, and it's always a metaphor of fry bread. There are 14 headings, and it's fry bread is shape, fry bread is art, fry bread is nation. So it goes on and on with this repetition, and it's very interesting, that resource as well. So we are invited to go to that place. We don't know where we go. And that's what we find in the back cover, which is not the same as the front cover when we take off the dust jackets. And we see how this is the essence of the book. You see how, I'm pointing, yeah, I'm pointing at the right thing. So you see they're around a table, this is a tablecloth, and they are all taking different types of fry bread. You see different hands. You could probably imagine they could be children, etc. Yeah. So it's interesting how they're different, and how this is also the essence of the story. So the first page is fry bread is food: flour, salt, water, cornmeal, baking powder, perhaps milk, maybe sugar, all mixed together in a big bowl. So what happens is that now the woman that we saw in the previous page is carrying an empty bowl, and all the children behind her are carrying each of them one ingredient that you can read: flour, right, salt, and they're going somewhere together. Yeah. It's also interesting how you see their different races, different skin colors, but they're all Native American, as we saw in the picture before, right? So we break with all these stereotypes. Fry bread is shaped: hands mold the dough, flat like a pancake, round like a ball, or puffy like Nana's softest pillow. So here we have to highlight how this is accompanied, text is accompanied by the illustration. You see how the fry bread is, sorry, because I have to find, yeah, the fry bread is, here is flat, clearly. Here you can see that it's more puffy because she's putting her fingers inside, and you also feel like touching it, don't you? It's like, ooh, what a nice feeling, right? And then you also have more rounded shapes. So what is important about this that is not so evident is that it refers clearly to the importance that Native American give to the cycle, the circle and the cycle. The circle is always present in Native American because they think that we are all part of a circle, and life is a cycle where we're born, we live and we die, and the cycle goes on and on. And this is represented, this shape, all the time in the story in fry bread. It's also represented in the bowl, in the cup here, in the spoons, and in the table. And me as a reader, I feel like I am there cooking with them. I am part of that table. I am helping them to make the recipe. Yeah. So it's interesting how you feel already part of the community. Also, the illustrations are highly important because the warm colors that are used, also the happy faces, they are relaxed. So you're also happy to be with them and joining that experience, yeah? Fry bread is color, golden brown, tan or yellow, deep like coffee, sienna or earth, light like the snow and cream, warm like rays of sun. So clearly there is a metaphor between the skin color of the characters and also fry bread, which is, I mean, you can see this fry bread is more golden brown, this one is yellow, but in the end, the important is you have to taste it, you have to know what it is like in order to have an opinion. So we cannot judge the book by its cover. We have to taste fry bread and you like it, no matter it's golden, brown or tan or yellow, yeah? And again, it's breaking this stereotypes. It's also interesting how this Native American character who is a girl, is wearing braids, that is also very Native American. He wears shorts. This is not very common if we go back to the old tradition, because women and girls had to wear skirts in case they gave birth. It was something superstitious, but also related to the way they lived. And so here, this is more adapted to the way they live nowadays, but it's done, in my view, such a natural and balanced way that you don't even feel it. You feel that it's part of what it should be. So that's I think, the good thing about the picture book as well. Then fry bread is time on weekdays and holidays, supper or dinner, powwows and festivals, moments together with family and friends. Again, we come back to the table and we are invited to sit with them and have dinner with them. Here we can see the parents and are wearing braids. So they're like preserving the old traditions, and they wear tattoos as well. The woman is wearing tattoos, seem to be flowers, and the man is wearing more geometrical figures. That is more typical of the Navajo pattern they used. And on the table, it's interesting how this jug that you can see here, or the sugar bowl, also has typical Navajo patterns. Yeah, the bowls, the plates. It's also interesting how some ingredients that are on the table were brought from America to Europe, like corn, tomato, but also this is mixed in a very natural way with elements that were the other way around, brought from Europe to America, like, for example, lettuce. So we see that they're all happy, they're together. And I also want to point out that this character is Kevin, is the writer of the book, okay? He appears throughout the book. That's very interesting as well. So fry bread is art, sculpture, landscape, portrait, our daily craft, shared from teacher to student, a cycle of heritage and fortune. Again, we see how the mother, she's wearing a very Native American skirt, again with the same pattern. She's teaching the children how to do baskets that had many different purposes, but they were very important for Native Americans. And the mother on the right page is showing to them Kachina dolls that were typical of the Pueblo Native Americans that lived in the southwest of the US. These dolls, they were preserving the moon and the sun. And they are also, Native Americans were highly superstitious. So they also symbolize hope for the future. As you can see, maybe you don't see very well in the illustration, but they're women. So women also means fertility and also addresses to the continuity of the generations, which is always also present in this book with the circle, with also what you will see afterwards, okay? So fry bread is history, the long walk, the stolen land, strangers in our own world, with unknown food, We made new recipes from what we had. Well, I can imagine that you realize that this is the mood has totally changed. This is the turning point of the story where the children are looking at the grandmother and they're very worried about what she's talking about. So our gaze goes, instead of going to the right, which is the normal thing, we go to the left because all the attention is on the grandmother. This is very interesting for many reasons. He's talking about the long walk, which was a real event that took place when Navajo had to leave their homes. They were deported by the US government in 1864, and they had to go to New Mexico and live there. They had to take a 500-mile way, and they were just given essential ingredients like lard, yeast, flour, and salt. That's why in the text it says clearly, we made new recipes from what we had. So what did they make? They made, among other things, fry bread, which is not necessarily a healthy dish, but that's what they did. So it's very interesting. So that's the main reason of this book. Although the illustrations are very subtle and we normally feel happy, in this case, we also see that the story is deeper. We really see that it gets into our hearts, because that's the main reason why Kevin wrote the story, recalling the ancestors as well, okay? Other symbolic images that we have in this picture are the crows that are around the children and the elders that represent death. They're also bringing bad news. And it's so interesting how you can see at the back of the illustration how these figures seem to be phantasmagoric, and they mix it, they almost mix with the crows, getting, in this case, not to differentiate between is it a person or is it the crow. So closer to death than to living, because they were starving, they had to go through very bad conditions. It's also interesting how she is the grandmother telling the story. The stories were sacred, and they were normally told by the chiefs or the elders or shamans. In this case, the woman is telling the story because she belongs to a matriarchal tribe, that is the Navajo, which means that she has a lot of power. She can make decisions like when men go to war and things like that, okay? So, fry bread is nation. Abenaki, Apache, Arapaho, Ojibwe, Onondaga, Oglaga Sioux, Narragansett, Navajo, Nipmuc, Seminole, Shoshone, Sac and Fox, hundreds and hundreds of tribes. As we saw in the end papers, there were hundreds of names, and this is again the wall where the names are displayed, and the parents are reading the names of some sovereign nations, and they feel proud about this because this is a great accomplishment. We cannot forget that they were removed from their lands. They were sent to the worst parts of North America, the warmest or the coldest parts. They had to adapt to a new home, a new way of living. And so now for them, having the sovereign nations and being able to take decisions is something very important. Fry bread is everything: round, flat, large, small, north, south, east, west, brown, yellow, black, white, familiar and foreign, old and new, we come together. So this is, again, an image where they try to summarize that in a way. Everything that you can find can be fry bread, and that's what also keeps everybody together, and that's what makes generations pass down the knowledge. And no matter who you are, how you are, where you come from, etc., we are there, okay, and we are together, and we are also part of that circle. In a way, this also a circular shape brings us to the idea that we are connected with the universe. But if we want to escape from the universe, we cannot do that. Okay, we're part of that circle as well. And Fry bread is us. We are still here, elder and young, friend and neighbor. So on the left, you can see the parents with the older kids. On the right, you can see the elders with the younger kids. And it's nice how these images guarantee that the generations are going to continue, that they're going to be united under difficult circumstances as well, as we have seen. And also recalling the ancestors. In this picture that you can see here, that the little boy is holding with an orange shirt, this is Fanny, who was the grandmother, Kevin's grandmother. Kevin is here, the author, and she's the grandmother. And they never met because she passed away. But he had the recipe, and so he wanted the recipe to keep going in his family, and that's why he made it. He had his own version of the recipe, but it's nice how he wanted to preserve that tradition. And then the last page is fry bread is you. So all of us can be fry bread. We are here thanks to fry bread. All of us can no matter what we are, who we are fry bread, okay? So I think this is a very nice message, especially finishing with the baby sitting on a mat with Navajo patterns, which is telling us clearly, I am going to preserve the traditions from my ancestors, and I will continue eating fry bread because I want to do that, because I feel proud of where I come from. So I think it's lovely. Well, after the story, you can find the recipe of fry bread. The measures are in the way they're in the US, so it's hard sometimes to pass them on to our measures, but it's nice. And then you can see all the recipe. And it's interesting how in the last pages, there is an explanation of every heading based on real facts, talking about the origin of fry bread, talking about all the nations. So that would be very interesting if you're working with your students to highlight all this, because that way the students will interpret the book in a more accurate way. Yeah. And well, how did we really work on this book? We have used the read aloud technique, which, as you all know, is when the adult reads the book aloud to a child or a group of children. And I will quote my beloved Sandy Morao and Ellie. Picture book read alouds can be very motivating for children as they experience a strong sense of achievement in having listened to, enjoyed, and understood the gist of an authentic piece of children's literature in English. However, this understanding is dependent upon the teacher's careful mediation. This is very important. They need to follow a structure that is the following: is before reading aloud, during reading aloud, and after reading aloud. During the before reading aloud, they should select the picture book following certain criteria. Also set up for the picture book, arise interest, that's very important, on learners and curiosity, and pre-teach the key vocabulary. In this case of fry bread, it would also be interesting to give them a lot of notions of these historical events, get them to get familiarized with symbolic elements like I did today with the raven, etc. During the second stage, they would be introduced to the peritextual features, seeing the picture book as an aesthetic object. And then they will have to take into account the children's age, level of English, and knowledge. In the after reading aloud, we would provide them activities to think and reflect. So this book is suitable for upper primary students and also secondary students, because as we saw, the topics are very deep. So one of the activities that I would propose would be to ask the students to look for flashcards on bread around the world, or to create their own flashcards, and then discuss in pairs about where this bread comes from. Where do you think they come from? What do they think they are made of, etc. Yeah. So this could be one of the activities. Then regarding the peritextual features, as we saw before, I would give them this dedicatory that is in the title, and I will read it for them and say, para Gladys, mi mamá, and the keeper of all recipes, JMM. So to arouse your curiosity, I would ask them, well, who do you think JMN stands for? So they look through the book, and then this is Juana Martinez Neal, who is the illustrator. And then I would ask them, okay, what language do you think they're using there? Para Gladys, mi mamá, what language do you think that is? And then why do you think the writer is using two languages? Okay, it's interesting because the writer is using these two languages because in many Native American tribes in the South, especially, they use mostly Spanish and English. So that is something very common, right? Maybe they don't get to that conclusion, but it's nice if they think about it and then you bring it in. Then also in the while reading aloud, I would show them these images, which the hamburger represents junk food or fast food, better say, sorry. And then the paella would be homemade food. And then the students have to discuss about the ingredients, if you are helping small producers or not, eating some food or another food. Also, the price, is it more expensive to eat homemade food or fast food? Then regarding as well the time that it takes to make. So after they have had some discussion in groups of 3 or 4, you can ask them to create a slogan. We should go for, of course, homemade food, because that's what the book talks about I make a recipe with my family and then we eat it all together. So even though it takes time, it's very nice. So the students would be invited to create a slogans. This would be in the last stage. I would give them some ideas if they don't really have any ideas of what a slogan is, that they have to use few words, that it would be better if it rhymes. And then they would have to maybe go to the playground and shout it out to the rest, that homemade food is the best, or also share with their classmates. So I gave some examples like healthy food for your mood, or go tasty with home cooked delicious food, or you deserve better food. So they can make things like that, okay? It's nice that they do it in the speech bubbles as well, or they can use posters. If they're creative, I think it's always good to make it as a product that they can touch or they can see as well, yeah? And well, the activities that I propose for secondary students are talking about traditional Native American dishes, succotash, boyapi, pemmican, poiha, and tamales. And after you introduce them to these traditional dishes, I would show them what ingredients were exported to Europe and what ingredients were imported from Europe. And what I would do is to show them what we call the Magic 8. These were ingredients, products that were taken from America to Europe. They're also called Magic 8, and they refer to corn, beans, squash, chilies, tomatoes, vanilla, and cocoa. And I would ask them, okay, what ingredients from the Magic 8 you think you can find in the traditional dishes? So they can think about it. They can also understand how this food has been made. Because, for example, if I display the previous picture, pemmican, it would be like a version of our bacon, right? It doesn't look like that, but it's something that preserves you from cold weather. It's not healthy at all, so it wouldn't be part of the ingredients. But here you can see tomatoes, you can see beans, so they have some of these magic 8 ingredients, okay? Then, as a final product, in the post stage, I would ask the students to write a letter after doing some research on what deportation is, because that's the main topic of Friar Bread as well. They would have to look at different cases of deportation, how you can be deported in different countries for different reasons. And then in order to take action, they would have to write a letter to a particular person to help them, no, and find a solution, so they can also feel that they're doing something useful for the rest, to fight for human rights. Okay, so that's the way I think it would be interesting for them to feel important and that they're doing something useful for the rest. It would also be interesting to give them some guidance, I think, on persuasion, how to write a persuasive letter and all that, so they can convince higher administrations or people that could take responsibility on that as well. And well, now I will move on to how we worked on citizenship education. Well, based on the competences, values, attitude, skills, and knowledge and critical understanding, if these activities are carried out by the teachers in a proper way, they would be able to work all these descriptors. These are taken from the reference framework of competences for democratic culture. So they would be able, the students, to work on values, which 201 stands for promoting the view that we should be tolerant of the different beliefs that are held by others in society. They would also be working on 204, which is express the view that the cultural diversity within a society should be positively valued and appreciated. You can also work on the attitudes, because 401, it stands for shows interest in learning about people's beliefs, values, traditions, and worldviews. That's very important. And also 509 expresses respect for others based on the recognition of the dignity of all persons and their human rights. I would just read a couple of examples because I don't want you to get too many things in your head, okay? Then skills, 1303 would be compassion for people who are being treated unfairly. And then 1309 would be can describe feelings identified at other people. And then regarding knowledge and critical understanding, they would be reflecting critically on the prejudices they have and stereotypes that lie behind them. As we saw before, thinking about Native American wears a feather, rides on a horse. No, that's not the image that we should have now, right? After reading Friar Bread. And then another knowledge and critical understanding descriptor would be explain why everybody has a responsibility to respect the human rights of others. So to conclude, I would like to say that this book will, regarding intercultural citizenship education, we help learners to be aware of the different cultures in different parts of the world. And learners will also be aware of the multicultural society in North America through the characters of the book. So these are the references, and thank you very much for listening to me all this time, and I'll be very happy to listen to all your comments or questions.
Thank you, Mercedes. Do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Sure.
And then we can all clap.
Thank you.